Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome back to Adventure Capital, where we not only discuss the entrepreneurial journeys and adventures with founders who have raised capital on WeFunder, but also the different resource providers and mentors helping founders along the way. Huzzah! Today we have Tiana Laurence, General Partner at Laurence Innovation, an investment fund powering the fourth industrial revolution, which focuses on early stage companies led by women and other underrepresented founders. We thank you so much for your work, Tiana. WeFunder Gang Gang, take it away.
Tiana, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Tiana is the lead investor of Accelerate 3D, a company currently raising on WeFunder, and we're super excited to get to talk to her. Tiana, to get us kicked off, could you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, happy to. I have been angel investing for almost 7 years. And last year I started my own micro fund to invest in pre-seed and seed stage companies.
Super cool. How did you first get into angel investing?
For me, it was a really long journey. I wanted to start doing investing when I was about 19, but I had no cash. And I was waiting tables and I worked at a bank and I had like 3 different jobs. And I realized you wouldn't get rich doing these jobs. You would just barely be able to make your rent. And as I was trying to understand how to not live like that for the rest of my life, I started researching how to start a company and how to do investing and what different strategies had built wealth over time. I go to the public library every day and just hang out in the business section and browse through the different books and read, Warren Buffett stuff. And slowly over time, I figured out, okay, well, if I'm going to make money, I need to start a company. So I started doing that in my 20s and then sold my first company when I was 29. And then I started another software company. I raised venture capital for that. And then in 2017, I left that and started investing full time as an angel. And then last year, I launched my first micro fund to do investing with other people's capital.
Wow. What was your first company that you ended up selling?
So I ended up, I was just a scrappy kid. So I found I could, build websites, do marketing stuff pretty well in a time when other people were still kind of struggling with how to, set up a WordPress website and stuff like that. So that company grew from that to had a couple different employees in Portland and an office, and we did everything from shooting video for clients to setting up websites, everything across the board. And then that company was acquired by one of our competitors in town.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you have a specific lens now that you are a more seasoned, consistent investor, and also through your own fund? What is the lens that you guys are looking to invest through?
Yeah. So I like to invest in things that I understand, and I love technology. So I spend a lot of my time researching basically all the different emerging technologies, whether it's protein folding or graphene or 3D printing, blockchain, things like that. And so that's sort of like, I'm always looking for that edge piece, because I think that's sort of like where you can get really outsized returns. And it's also the place that I'm passionate about. So it's like when you're self-directed, self-employed, you need to be able to wake up every day with passion for what you're doing. And so for me, this is the thing that I'm passionate about. So it's easy to get up every day and I just do it naturally instead of like feeling like I have to be forced into a discipline. So it lets me sustain this over a long time.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes total sense. How did you first get introduced to Accelerate 3D?
Yeah, I met them through another friend of mine who runs an incubator here, the Founders Institute. Founders Institute is an amazing organization. They are very prolific. They help a lot of startups basically iterate from idea to product market fit, and they're a global organization. So I have a lot of love for those guys, and we were just getting a beer, I think on a Friday, and I met the CEO at one of those events, and we started chatting. And I think what he's doing with large scale 3D printing is really interesting, especially as we think about like the supply chain security that we're all facing in this post-COVID world. We need to start thinking about what does manufacturing, the future of manufacturing look like, and how can we accelerate that within our own, decentralized way. And so when he talked about what he was doing with Accelerate 3D, I was like, oh, this is lovely. I think this sort of fits in potentially an ecosystem that can help both mitigate supply chain risk and bring manufacturing, decentralized manufacturing here in the United States.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to look up. You said it was Founders Lab or Founders?
Founders Institute, and they're
Founders Institute. Okay, cool.
They help a lot of early stage startups, and they're also investors as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so obviously, as you are aware, we have a mix of accredited and unaccredited investors in our community at WeFunder. So for some people, this is kind of their first taste of investing. They're kind of dipping their toe in the water. So can you describe, given your research and experience, like what were some of the other main factors you were looking at when deciding to invest in Accelerate 3D besides just the problem that they're solving?
Yeah, I think that, the problem needs to be interesting. And I hold the opinion that investors should invest in things that they're interested and passionate about, and use their capital as a means of like creating the kind of world that they want to live in. But that said, like, what are the other factors around success? And I think any investor that is honest realizes that it's a numbers game. That even when you get the team right and the problem right, there's a million other factors that can come into play that will cause that company to fail. I know when I was starting my first companies, I remember I was in the library and I was reading, and I was like, okay, there's this little passage that's basically said that 1 out of 10 companies would succeed. So that means 9 times out of 10, you're going to fail. So 90% of the time you're going to fail. And so I made a little promise to myself as an entrepreneur, or, I hadn't even started down that journey yet, that I would be willing to try at least 9 times, maybe 10 or 11.
I love that. That's such a great perspective.
And if I kept on failing, like after 11, then there's like clearly something,
The odds are literally against you. Yeah.
And I think that that's the same perspective that investors need to have too. You can't think like, you need to think with each one of these, this one's going to win, and I'm okay if it fails. And to do enough investments that you can win through the power of numbers, and not just luck. You need to stack luck within your favor. So that's a perspective I take both as an entrepreneur and as an investor. And that would be the advice I would give new investors in the space is, one, look at the team. The team will be the primary drivers of the success of it. Is the team right? And
what do you mean by team? Just to dig into that a little bit, like the team's background, how well they work together. Yeah.
There's been research that shows that what really matters is very simple. It's the integrity of the individuals, the conscientiousness, like how hard are they willing to get up and work every day, kind of like that grit piece. Like, does it bother them at night when they left something undone? That sort of like that characteristic, and intelligence. So if you have a smart founder that is willing to work their butt off, and they have integrity, that is more correlated with success than anything else, any kind of educational background or these sort of like artificial tokens of success. So that's what I'm looking for in reading in my team and the teams that I fund, is I'm looking for intelligence, integrity, and conscientiousness. And then, that other aspect of like, am I making enough small bets that I'll win over time, and reserve the right to invest again. Basically, it's called pro rata. So that when I find a team that is executing well, I can increase my exposure to them as they are de-risked, like as they perform better and get farther down the pipeline towards product market fit.
Totally. Great. Yeah, that's super helpful. In terms of, it's interesting that you were, two-time entrepreneur to angel investor to VC. How do you think your relationship has changed? Or I guess not changed, but, how do you think your relationship is different maybe than, the average VC who didn't start a company, with in terms of like the support that you give founders or the way that you look at going above and beyond after you make an investment?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've definitely failed more than, I succeeded. So I call myself more than a two-time founder.
Oh, okay. Two-time successful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a couple successful investments that allowed me to keep on investing as well.
Awesome.
Having raised venture capital myself, I know a lot of the tricks on how to sort of like try to skew things so that it looks rosier than it is. And so, there's this idea that everyone's going to lie to you. So like the acceptance of that, and then trying to uncover the truth and be like accepting of sort of like the framing of it. So I think I take kind of like a different approach around that. Is I like, I try to cultivate a relationship where my teams feel safe with me, feel safe to share like what's actually going on, and proactively, because when they wait a year to tell me something's wrong, it's too late, which I definitely have had happen where companies have come to me, they're completely out of cash. They pursued a customer that didn't exist, or they had to fire an executive and they didn't ever really replace them. Like, then it's too late to help. But coming early, but that builds trust. Like you have to build trust with your teams in order for them to feel safe to do that, because a lot of the times the world sort of tells them that they can, they only need to show what's going well. What is their Instagram and their Twitter feeds say about the nature of the reality versus the real reality of it. A startup is, especially being a CEO, I think is probably one of the loneliest, hardest jobs in the world. You have your investors that have really high expectations of you, and you have your team that is looking to you for guidance, and you also have your customers. So you're sort of fighting this three-dimensional emotional battle, and it's a very lonely place to be. So having trusted people that you can connect with that have gone through that journey as well, I think is important. And that's one of those things that I try to bring to the table, is that relationship building, so that I can proactively help them.
Yeah, no, that's really great. We talk a lot about, what's required for the pitch on WeFunder and what's best to get across to our audience and attract the most investors during your crowdfunding campaign. But what would you say to give advice to founders who are pitching their companies to VCs at a later stage?
Yeah, there's really just a few things that I think investors really care about. Like one, what's the size of the market? Are you solving an interesting problem, and are you doing it in a way that lets you deal with the competition? Because every problem in the world has been solved. Maybe it just hasn't been solved well. So coming with that realization of like, hey, I'm solving this innate human need, but I'm doing it in this way. So, being real about competition, being real about what is the true value and why your product or service is so irresistible to your customer and sticky. So having a really clear idea about that and being able to communicate that really succinctly is very important, probably the most important thing that you can do. And then, being real about where the progress is. You can't tell an investor that you're one place if you're not, because they'll come in, they'll, look at it and be like, okay, this looks great. And then they'll dig in and it's not there. And as soon as they see information that doesn't line up, as an investor, we're so inundated by pitches, people that want capital. One of the easiest mechanisms is like, if somebody is bullshitting you a little bit, you just, I don't have time for that. There is no second chance.
The trust goes both ways in terms of, the relationship that you have to build.
Yeah. So, it's okay to be exactly where you are. Especially, I do pre-seed and seed, which is, pre-revenue, pre-customers, even sometimes a good idea.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just like, well, I really think that this team has sort of like grabbed a little bit of the right idea, and I think that they'll be able to evolve quickly into that product market fit. So that's what I'm looking for, but you have to be honest about where that is. So that would be, have those two things really crisp. And then the other part is like, understand that investors are incredibly busy, like oversaturated individuals. Like we have too much stuff coming in that, I'm just a small time investor, and I cannot manage the amount of like inbound that I have through like social media, email accounts, text messages. It's an overwhelming amount of information. So having an introduction through like trusted sources, like is find a way to distinguish yourself, and don't just spam. Don't just spam an investor, because it's like you're just creating more of the storm and you're not standing out. And when I was in that position raising capital, I would try to find 2 to 3 different people that person I wanted to connect with, whether it was a customer or an investor, new and trusted. And then I would ask them to intro me. And for the really busy people, the first intro would get ignored, and the second intro sometimes would get ignored, but usually by the third time they're like, wow, I'm starting to hear about this person from all different directions. I must need to connect with them. So that's a little way of being able to kind of like cut through the clutter and get, top of mind for an investor.
Yeah, that's all really great advice. And a lot of it applies to reaching out to WeFunder investors as well, or folks in your network. I mean, we talk a lot about building out almost like a drip campaign for the different subsets of your audience, and reminding people, most people are not going to invest on the first email you send them. Like, hey, my WeFunder campaign's live. They're like, cool, awesome, good for you. Sometimes you have to remind them a couple of times and share more of that good news. It works very similarly. But so I guess one of the last questions I have for you is just on your experience investing on WeFunder. I'm sure most of your investments at the seed stage are not through WeFunder. Why did you decide to invest in Accelerate 3D through their WeFunder campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think as an angel investor or first time investor, this is a great way to have like a tremendous amount of deal flow. and also see like social proof of whether or not like a company is resonating, like you're crowdsourcing that due diligence piece that can feel a little bit overwhelming, like as an individual investor. And then as somebody that's deploying capital from we call them LPs, our investors, you have to go where the companies are. And so I knew I've actually done 2 different investments on WeFunder that I've led. And I knew those startups before they chose to do WeFunder, and we discussed whether or not it was a good idea. And so like as a company is thinking about how to raise that first, friends and family round, if you do not have friends and family that have that capital that they can give you, how do you bridge that funding gap? And that's one of those major challenges, is there's not very many investors that really want to sit down in the seed stage that it takes to get the company off the ground, because it's very, very risky. And so most venture capitalists build their portfolios so they have somewhere between 18 and 30 assets. That's about 95% of venture capitalists, and they're investing within a specific technology vertical. They have a specific knowledge. They're an expert in a specific set of technologies. And then they try to find those 18 assets over 3 years. And so because they only have that many kind of like bites at the apple, they need to be really specific about where they deploy that capital, and they need to try to de-risk it as much as possible, which for them means long due diligence cycles, being really picky about whom they deploy that capital in and when they deploy it. Are they basically able to defend themselves to their LPs later? Like if the fund doesn't perform, saying, no, we did all the due diligence, they hit these sort of metrics. And so they've sort of like covered themselves on that side. And so this early stage is incredibly difficult to invest in unless it's part of your thesis.
Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, your testimonial and everything as well is super helpful for the companies that you've invested in on WeFunder. So I think, there can be a lot of mutual benefit for the companies that can find a seed stage VC or maybe another sort of prominent angel in their industry that can write something really compelling. So we appreciate you investing. And so the last question, I know we're almost at time, but the last question I have for you is something we ask everyone on the podcast, which is, what is your best advice for a founder starting a company?
My best advice is to keep on working at it, to wake up every day and do exactly what you can. It's in that persistent grit that you'll uncover it, and to understand that, you're going to have, long periods of just nothing working, and like the acceptance that that's part of the process. But to keep on trying and to, iterate. Don't be afraid to iterate against your idea, and listen to feedback, but understand whom you're getting that information from. Get information from the right sources. So if there's sort of like this direct correlation between somebody willing to give you money and somebody not. And so if the person is willing to give you money, listen to their advice a lot more than the friends and family that will have all these different opinions about your website or your product or the way that you say things. Know who you're getting that advice from, and be willing to iterate until you hit that right fit.
Yeah, those are great pieces. Well, Tiana, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time. This has been super informative, and we look forward to staying in touch and seeing you on WeFunder.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Adventure Capital. I hope you laughed, took notes, shed a tear, and most importantly, feel ready to go off on your own adventure. And remember, whenever you are ready, WeFunder is here to help.